You are listening to Little Red and the Troll in the Wood, a bedtime story written by George Lewis Avery and voiced by Callum, courtesy of 11 Labs. Let us begin. The other evening I was traipsing down this deserted lane with me club resting on me shoulder, searching for a campsite away from civilized folks for to cook my victuals and to map out the stars before I hunkered down to sleep, when a little lassie came skipping up the cobblestone path from behind, and she taken me by the finger. She weren't more than a mouthful, and was dressed in a little pink hood, with matching boots and stockinged legs, and she carried a little twig of a branch in her free hand, like a rider's crop, and a wicker bassinet was swinging at her elbow. This little lassie, she just kept on keeping stride, skipping along beside o' me, whilst clinging to my finger bone. And all the while she never give me a sideways glance, and non-stop she yammered on like a yakety jaybird, what is shaking pine cones down out in the tree onto my head when I'd overslept in springtime. Her trusting innocence disarmed me, and I forgot about the hunger that was gnawing at my insides moments before, and the muscles at each end of my lips began to tighten, till my mouth drawed up at the corners into a smile. We hadn't traveled far along our mutual path into the wood when we overtook this badly nourished fellow, a wolfish gent dressed all in black sequined leather, who was leaning with his shoulder blades supported against the intimacy of a tree's shadow, chewing on a fat alfalfa stem with flashy gold-capped teeth. His alligator boots crossed at the ankles, and fedora pulled down to shade the male intent in his eyes, narrowed eyes that followed every step of the wee child, what skipped at my knee, and a cold, shivering wind crept through the trees, and it whispered, "What a tender young creature! What a nice plump mouthful! At any cost I must have her." And as if she'd heard, the little lassie turned her head his way, and stuck out her tongue, and laughed and laughed. Such a clever young thing. She was not at all afraid of him. But he was right to be wary of me. For I am I for all to see, and I am Troll. He ducked off into the trees, but I knowed she'd not seen the last of him, for he was a tenacious one, and crafty, like the wolf that he was. The little tyke held onto my hand as we followed that winding path through the wood until we'd reached a cottage, what stood with its door ajar, whereat she let go her hold and skipped through the doorway. And me, I stepped over near the window, and I listened a spell from the outside, and it be a good thing that I did what I done. "Oh, grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with my child," was the reply. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have," she said. "The better to see you with my dear." "But grandmother, what large hands you have, the better to hug you with." "Oh, but grandmother, what a terrible big mouth you have, the better to eat you with." And no sooner had the wolfish impostor who was posing as her ailing grandmother said this than, with one bound, he was out of bed, and that is when my big arm flashed through the open window. I grabbed him up by his sarcoptic nape with me big calloused hand, relishing in the feel of fragmentating vertebrae within my tight grasp, and the little child, looking on with them big scart eyes, could hardly understand why I was choking her grandmother, whose hairy feet thrashed the empty air 2 skips above the floor. But I am Troll, and I am not one for explaining nor seeking approval for the things I do. So I fetched the pretender through the window, and I shook him inside out like a pair of old trousers, and after I hanged him up by his heels from a tree to cure. I entered through the door, and that little rose-hooded lassie was still standing there, frozen like, with big tears building at the bottoms of her eyne. So I fetched a bundle from the closet, what turned out to be her real grandmother, bound and gagged and traumatized near to death's door. And my heart sure beat easier, 'cause that little lassie forgive me for my brutish methods. She wiped that big old tear away onto her sleeve, and she even give me a hug. And me a troll even. Grandmother was a tough old gal, and once she'd got a slice of cake and a bottle of wine inside of her, what her little grandchild had brung along in the bassinet, she went outside and took a wicker broom to that rapscallion in the tree till she was wore plumb out. Then we put grandmother back to bed, and I seen the child safe back home. The night waned on, and the 'ittle lassie was comfy and snug in her own bed, and me I was sleeping on the cold ground with grimy lips and a full belly, beside a dwindling campfire where, come daylight, a score of camp crows was a-fighting over meat scraps, clinging to the ample bones scattered about the base of a cauldron, what had stewed me latest supper. For I am troll, and I hadn't eaten me supper yet when I'd got back to camp. But I knowed the way back to grandmother's house. That side of beef I'd left swinging in the tree, he wasn't much to brag about. But once I'd added a plump grandmother to the pot, along with a dab of salt, and the sweet taters I'd plundered from her pantry, my supper was complete. I've been counting on me fingers and me toes, and in 7 more nights it'll be Halloween. That's when me and the 'ittle one is going trick-or-treating together. She knows the way to every house in the neighboring wood, and once I see her safely home, I'm going back for seconds. And I'm toting a bigger sack, for after all, I am troll, yours for direction. The end. You have been listening to Little Red and the Troll in the Wood, a bedtime story written by George Lewis Avery. If you have enjoyed this tale and crave more encounters with troll, you might consider the fantasy adventure titled Stinkletoes, Under the Mountain and Over the Moon. Fetching 3 5-star reviews on Reader's Favorite, it is available on Amazon in various formats. As one pundit put it is exactly the kind of story you'd get if Shakespeare, the Brothers Grimm, and a slightly unhinged mountain hermit collaborated over moonshine. Copyright 2025 by George Lewis Avery. All rights reserved. No portion of this audio file may be reproduced in any form without written permission from the publisher or author, except as permitted by U.S. copyright law.